Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, Food Allergen Challenges, Trends, and Technology Update. Before we begin our presentation today, I would like to take a few moments to go over some housekeeping items. We will be recording this webinar, and this webinar is CLE approved, and we will be asking that you enter a passcode for CLE credit a few times throughout the presentation. In today's webinar, Dr. Suderman will discuss the most common food allergens, allergen-based recalls, consumer risks, FDA and USDA regulatory programs, food industry programs, consumer advisory programs, restaurant allergen management, restaurant allergen risks, and examples of restaurant and food manufacturing legal cases. To give you a little background about our presenter, Dr. Darrel Suderman, he is the president of Food Technical Consulting and has worked for food manufacturing and leading restaurant chains for more than 20 years. For the last 7 years, Dr. Suderman has served as an expert witness and consultant for both plaintiff and defense attorneys throughout the United States. Dr. Suderman received his BS and MS degrees in agricultural education and his Ph.D. in food science from Kansas State University. He holds 2 U.S. patents, co-authored a food processing book, and has written over 40 peer-reviewed and trade magazine articles and white papers. He has worked in research and development, quality assurance, and food safety for many of the leading restaurant chains, including KFC, Boston Market, Church's Chicken, Quiznos, Captain D's, Chick-fil-A, and Wendy's International. In addition, Dr. Suderman co-founded Business IQ as a business intelligence IT consulting company, which has been accepted as an official partner of SAP Software Company. A few of his clients have included Foster Farms, Jenny O Turkey Store, Golden Plump Poultry, Johnsonville Sausage, E&J Gallo Winery, Tyson Foods, Organic Valley, and Givaudan Ruhr Foods. For those of our attendees who require a code word for tracking purposes, the code word for today is allergy. During the presentation, we will take short breaks, and during that time, we'll ask that you enter this code into the Q&A widget for CLE reporting purposes. The Q&A is located to the left of your screen. Please remember that if you are applying for CLE credit, you must log onto your computer as yourself. Also, please remember to complete the survey that will appear to the right of your screen at the end of the presentation. As a provider of CLE credits, we are required to have supportive information that you have attended, and in many states the survey is required. CLE certificates will be provided within 24 to 48 hours via email. CLE credit is only available to those who have attended the live presentation. You are not eligible to receive CLE credit if you view this presentation on demand. Also, the PowerPoint slides can be downloaded from the resource list on the left of your screen. Dr. Suderman welcomes your questions. Please use the Q&A widget to submit your questions throughout the presentation. We will take intermittent breaks so that Dr. Suderman can respond. Thank you all again for attending today, and Darrel, the presentation is now turned over to you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really looking forward to talking with you about food allergens. It's become a big topic within the food industry. I think over the last several years we've seen a lot of interest in gluten-free products, but I believe as we go forward into the future, the allergen products are going to be much more of interest and in the public eye and in newspapers and television and what even gluten-free is. So I hope that the information I give you today will be both educational for you and hopefully for those working on cases, hopefully there'll be some benefit helping you on the cases that you're working on now. First slide I have here shows the big 8, what they're called big 8 food allergens. At the top we notice soy, we have tree nuts, we have milk, fish, peanuts, shell, crustacean type of seafood, wheat, and egg. And some other potential allergen foods are sesame seeds, celery, buckwheat, mustard, and lupin. Even though these are not regulated now, they are being monitored and researched. For instance, there's also some variation in what the U.S. government considers to be an allergen versus other governments. And as an example, Sesame seeds have to be declared as an allergen in Canada, but they do not have to be in the United States. And that doesn't make a lot of sense, but it probably shows the progression of scientific thought as countries share information on allergens and develop a cohesive allergen program. As we go on into the presentation a little bit later, I'll share some of my insight that I gained traveling to Australia last October. But you'll find out that Australia and New Zealand probably have more thorough and well thought out allergen programs than what we do even in the United States within the FDA or USDA. This slide shows some of the other potential food allergens that I mentioned before. When you're talking about food allergens, it's important to keep in mind that we're usually talking about proteins and or food products that have significant protein levels. For instance, sesame seed can have up to 18% protein. To the right, upper right-hand corner, I have a picture of celery seed, and I'm not sure exactly protein content of that, but when we get to mustard seed or mustard meal, we can get up to 26% protein, and buckwheat we can get as high as 14% protein. Now, to benchmark that versus what regular wheat flour is in the United States and around the world, we're talking wheat flour that's somewhere between 7 to maybe 11% protein, depending upon the variety. So the important thing I just wanted to share with you is that generally in every situation, an allergen is an existing protein of some sort with different peptide arrangements. On this particular slide, I've listed lupin, and the Food and Drug Administration in our country has released a warning about this legume, stating that it can cause allergic reactions ranging from a mild case of hives to full-blown anaphylaxis. The most susceptible populations are people with existing legume allergies, especially peanut allergies, and obviously another one would be soy allergies. In the lower right-hand corner, you can I've put an example of an ingredient statement and packaging label where lupin is mentioned. And this happens to be in a particular a pasta product. On this slide, it plots the allergen-based recalls through August 13th of 2008. And it is a chart that was put together by the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program at the University of Nebraska, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but they basically are the thought tank, so to speak, on allergens within the United States. They are the most respected organization on allergies. They conduct research at the University of Nebraska, but it just shows how the recalls as a result of allergen-based ingredients has just skyrocketed, and I believe, is the #1 reason for food recalls in the United States at this time. And it shouldn't be. We'll go into some of the reasons why it may be, but it's a big problem facing the food industry, and getting an education and thinking through ahead of time how to respond is probably the wisest way to go. Sorry, I'm trying to get a... Okay, let's talk a little bit about the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program called FALCPA. It was established in 1995 as a cooperative venture between the University of Nebraska and 7 founding industry charter members. Today, FALCPA has more than 70 member companies, more than 12 staff members, and several graduate students. FALCPA has 2 primary missions. first mission is to develop and provide the food industry with credible information, in other words, a resource of expert opinions, tools, and services related to allergenic foods. Its second mission is to develop and provide the agricultural biotechnology industry with credible information, expert opinions, tools, and services relating to novel foods and food ingredients, including genetically modified products. And I'm sure that one of the things that is going now at the University of Nebraska and some other universities is to try to create some genetically modified knockoffs of some of the allergens that we talked about so that people with allergies could and hopefully would be able to eat and share the same type of similar food products. But we'll wait and see as to what's taking place in that area. Okay, when we talk about medical treatments, epinephrine or adrenaline is a medication that can reverse the severe symptoms of anaphylaxis. It is given as a shot, is available as self-injector, also known as epinephrine auto-injector, that can be carried by people with allergen problems and used if needed. Epinephrine is highly effective medication, but it must be administered promptly during anaphylaxis to be most effective. Delays can result in death in as little as 30 minutes. Even if epinephrine is administered promptly and symptoms seem to subside completely, the individual who was treated with epinephrine should always be taken to the emergency room for further evaluation and treatment. What is the anaphylaxis reaction? During anaphylaxis, a severe, potentially fatal allergic reaction. Symptoms can affect several areas of the body and may threaten breathing and blood circulation. Food allergy is the most common cause of anaphylaxis, although several other allergies, such as insect stings, medications, or latex, are other potential triggers. Rarely, anaphylaxis is triggered by exercise. Another common form of anaphylaxis can occur when a person exercises soon after eating a problem food. Very rarely does it occur without an identifiable trigger. At the present, strict avoidance of problem foods is the only way to prevent this reaction. What are some food allergen label risks? And this is what causes some of the recalls. One is that a food product may have an allergen in it, but it's not labeled appropriately, that it has that. Another risk that labels can present is that they sometimes don't provide enough information, or the information is not accurate or appropriate. Third label risk is that labeling for allergen when it is at a negligent level or non-existent. We'll talk a little bit later about what they call this as precautionary labeling. Fourth label risk is the mislabeling due to lack of coordination between the formula, the product, and the packaging label caused by manual or automated systems. So one is you have to know and be aware of what the allergen is in the formula, what the percent level is, and then as it gets made, it's mixed with other ingredients that may or may not contain allergens, and then you have to make sure that the package label makes sense. and is coordinated with all the formula and the product. And you may think that, well, it seems strange, and why would that even need to be a concern, and why are allergens the #1 recall reason? That's hard to explain, but I can say that since last Friday through the beginning of this week, there's already been 2 food recalls because of allergens just in the United States alone. So it's just common, and we'll go through some of the details of both of those recalls. And then another, #5, another allergen label risk is keeping the allergen level below the 1% in finished product could still signify hundreds of parts per million of allergens in a finished product. So there is a standard within the industry now, 1% of the finished product, and that usually is by content. But there's also, we'll get into this later, in Australia and some of the other countries, they've done research where they've got it down to parts per million. So there's really some conflicting standards as how we identify the levels of allergens in food products. Last is a shallow precautionary statement. Hello? Hello?
Darrel?
Yes. Hello?
Are you having problems connecting?
No, did it get disconnected?
No, I don't believe so. You can keep going with the presentation.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm moving on to the next slide. These transitions a little bit slow. What are some food allergen supply chain weak links? And this is a little bit different because this relates to the supply chain. In other words, supply chain in the food industry goes all the way from where an ingredient is manufactured, maybe where it's harvested, as it goes into a food process, gets formed into a product, and is packaged and put into distribution. Again, unlabeled allergens are the largest weak link in this whole process, followed by the appropriate item labeling. As we said before, and it applies to the supply chain also beyond the product development person in R&D, is due to lack of coordination between the formula, product, and package label caused by manual and automated systems. It can also be caused, or an example of a weak link would be the incomplete information transfer from the ingredient supplier to the manufacturers responsible for the final label at the end. And the last point I have here is the failure of ingredient supplier to notify the manufacturer when a change has been made. So some of the weak links that I've mentioned before, and in general, kind of to summarize this, is the allergen failures. Human failures can be that people just aren't keeping track of the ingredients that are in their food products. Sometimes label failures, in other words, a product could be manufactured and in a reformulated state. That reformulation never got back to the people that are in charge of creating the labels and approving the labels. And so there's some label failures. And then the requirements of the Food Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, which governs the food industry, and which what it really means is that food companies may not be adhering to government regulations, both as published by the FDA. And then an area that probably is a really big opportunity is the education of employees and the training of employees. And personally, I've been around a lot of food manufacturing companies lately, and I would say the whole area of allergens is is just really not a top priority. A lot of people are just focused on the more traditional product recalls. Maybe there's metal or glass or some other kind of adulteration in the product. So this is something that's the training and education of the public and the people in the plants is really important. There are several government programs and regulations, the government oversight programs, and I wanted to at least mention those as a reference for you. But the Food Safety and Modernization Act of 2012 was probably the most recent one, and it has bigger implications because it does allow the government to go in and to stop production or to close a plant down if there's gross violations of different FDA laws. You also have, and it's been around almost 15 years, but the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act, and then voluntary incidental trace allergen labeling tool, which is developed and created in Australia and followed by New Zealand. And it's called a VITAL tool or VITAL system. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, because I honestly believe that what they're doing in Australia and New Zealand is far superior to what we're doing in the U.S. food industry.
Darrel.
Yeah. Kind of slides here. It's a little bit slow. Okay. What I've listed here is mentioned before the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act that our government has. There are two things that I really wanted to mention to you, and that starts at kind of the middle of the page. It says the term major food allergens means anything of the following. So this is kind of the bottom line. First is milk, egg, fish, such as bass, flounder, or cod. Crustacean shellfish. Examples would be crab, lobster, and shrimp. And tree nuts, examples would be almonds, pecans, or walnuts, wheat, peanuts, and soybeans. And then secondly, the food ingredient that contains protein derived from a food specified in paragraph 1, which I just mentioned, except for the following. And what the following is any highly refined oil derived from a food specified in paragraph 1, and any ingredient derived from such highly refined oil. And these would be probably the soya-type products. And so I think what the thinking of the government is in this particular situation is that as the product is more and more refined, the chances, particularly in an oil situation, the chances of protein residual being there is less and less. So what that really means is for soy oil, it would not have to be listed as an allergen. This particular slide, I think I maybe have this twice, but we'll just look over it this once. It's the recommended vital allergen dose levels. And remember a little bit earlier I mentioned the VITAL program that was started and is being used in Australia and New Zealand, is that each of these protein areas that we've talked about has a different reference level as far as what makes it an allergen or at least concerned with in those countries. For instance, peanut protein recommends a reference dose set at 0.2 milligrams. Well, that certainly is a lot less and a lot lower than the 1% level that we use as a standard in the U.S. Milk protein has even a lower dose level of 0.1 milligrams. Egg proteins are even lower yet, and they have a reference dose around 0.03 milligrams. Hazelnut protein, 0.1 milligrams. Soy protein is 1 milligram. Wheat protein is 1 milligram. And shrimp protein is set at 10 milligrams, so very, very high. And what this really is really the importance of this is that it really comes, in my mind, to a level of a dosage level. And the 1% of just doesn't give that much protection to the customer, I don't believe. So we really, in the U.S., need to be working at what is the exact dose level. In other words, if you had a protein bar, so to speak, and it had an allergen in it, how much total allergen protein would you be consuming in one bar versus if you ate 2 or 3 bars? Obviously, there would be more. The dosage level would be higher, and that's what this is talking about.
Yep, we're going to do that.
Here's a little bit more information on this VITAL tool. The VITAL system is an essential standardized allergen risk assessment tool for food processors. It allows food processors to assess the impact of allergen cross-contamination and provide appropriate precautionary allergen labeling on their products. This tool was developed to make a single, simple, standardized precautionary statement available to assist food producers in presenting allergen advice consistently for allergic consumers. And it's not used in the U.S. It requires acknowledgement that a population threshold or reference does exist, which the FDA would be reluctant to do in this particular situation. There's a few other food industry programs that need to be a part and kind of partnered with the food allergen programs. And one of these is one that maybe most of you have heard about. It's called the HACCP program. Every food company is required to have a HACCP plan and have a HACCP workflow for every food product that's manufactured in a plant. And generally what they call it is hazard analysis critical control points. So there are specific critical control points. And for a lot of foods products, particularly those that may be cooked in a food plant, one of the critical control points is always temperature. You want to make sure that you hit an internal temperature. And in this situation, when we have a product that contains an allergen, one of the critical control points is when that allergen enters the manufacturing process and what is the quantity and what kind of test is being taken care of. The other important thing is to have an allergen control plan, and I'm not going to get into the details of that, but that's another requirement that a food manufacturing plant or company needs to have. It needs to be on the record in the administrative office. And it's very detailed as to how that product should be manufactured. And then the other thing is to have a good manufacturing practices, sometimes called current good manufacturing practices, that have guidelines in there listed for allergen products. I got a few slides here that actually show a little bit of information as far as ingredient statements. What you'll notice here is an ingredient statement for a random food product, and highlighted are some of the ingredients that could possibly have allergens, but generally the ingredients are listed in descending order from the amount of the largest amount to the smallest. And then at the very bottom, you can see that it says it contains wheat and soy ingredients, and those are the allergens that need to be declared for this particular product. And the allergen will always be preceded by the word contains, and the rest of the label will be the ingredients. Moving on to the next slide here. On this particular slide, I talked about precautionary statements, and they are used to inform the food allergic consumer about the potential for trace levels of unlabeled allergens. And you can see, like the other ingredient statement that we had, it lists the ingredients in descending order. It also has a little symbol that has the word nut in it, which means will tell the consumer whether this has a allergen from nuts in it. And it also highlights in bold lettering the ingredients that have the allergen in it. And then it says it's not suitable for nut allergy sufferers due to manufacturing methods. And so generally what a precautionary statement says is that even though it has that or doesn't have the allergen in it, it still could have the allergen because it was maybe blown in the dust in a plant or flower dust or whatever like that. And then here's another one that it's a regular statement with declarations of ingredients. And you'll notice highlighted in yellow is the natural almond flavor. And but at the bottom, it only says it contains wheat as an allergen. So even though almonds would be a nut, tree nut, that you'd have to be aware of the fact that it's in a flavor format or a liquid refined format is not required to be on the ingredient statement. Now, on this side, I thought it was kind of interesting. People get concerned and have a lot of strong opinions about ingredient statements and everything that's listed. I found this ingredient statement for just a natural egg, and I think some people would be surprised at all the different types of ingredients that would be in that situation. I want to have a few slides, I think, before our break here that refer to some discussion on restaurant allergen management. In my opinion, restaurants provide a high allergen trigger environment. And we've seen the beginning of what could be happening in the future recently with gluten-free products. Gluten-free in the restaurant business is primarily in the pizza product area right now. But companies like California Pizza Kitchen have actually quarantined off sections within their restaurant, back of the restaurant in their food preparation area, so that there's no contamination with the gluten-free pizza crust versus the others. Now, if you stop and think about that's one product, and very few other chains have went to the extreme of quarantine a section where just gluten-free products can be processed. It's just because the square footage and the stuff of the restaurants is pretty small to begin with. But I actually think that allergen-type products are as big or bigger problem than just gluten-free products. And so this is becoming, for the restaurant industry to offer this, it's going to be a challenge for sure.
I think stuff, he likes to come back and he likes to turn on, but I thought today they were.
Here's another picture showing food prepared and served in restaurants is neither regulated or monitored, and declaration statements are completely voluntary. And this, someone has asked me, what is the biggest danger to the consumer in the United States? I really would believe it's the restaurant industry, just because they're not set up, they're not governed, and they don't have any oversight by the FDA or USDA. And so it's pretty much a free-willing environment.
And you just like half listening. You shouldn't say that, but kind of half listening so that if something makes sure I have sound and all that. Because like at first I was like, my sound's not great, but the weather it does have.
Here's a slide showing restaurant kitchens. They must have a segregated area for allergen-free and gluten-free products, in my opinion, for preparation. This just shows a potential area within a restaurant, a tabletop, that this what could be produced from.
The other thing that the one is through, but about 5 feet in,
What are some of the restaurant allergen risks? Well, first of all, chefs don't declare all ingredients. A lot of times they prepare recipes based on their skill and their training, but they don't have it necessarily documented. This would probably be more in fast casual restaurants. Restaurant employees are not adequately trained on allergen risk and contamination prevention. I mentioned that before. Training is so important in this area, and then retraining so that people don't forget the policies and procedures that are needed to be followed to ensure that the customer gets an allergen-free product. The allergen information, if available, is not easily visible or hidden behind the front service counter. And allergen testing is expensive, but may and should be required for food assembled at the restaurant. Restaurant case legal implications. For restaurant cases, it is the expert witness responsibility to research employee training program, the supplier-customer relationship to see what goes on in the transfer of the product through the distribution system from the manufacturer to the customer, supplier food ingredient storage areas. Are they free of broken boxes and bags and other containers that may have allergen products in it that could cause contamination? The expert witness should also look at the supplier food ingredient information list, any patterns of deception and hidden information, and does the restaurant or does the food manufacturer have an allergen control plan, which I mentioned earlier in both the plan and the restaurant.
Okay, before we begin the question and answer segment, could all the attendees please type the passcode into the Q&A widget? Our first question is, what consumer environment worries you the most regarding allergen diet triggers?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, without a doubt, it's the food service restaurant industry for several reasons. First is that inbound food from manufacturers is usually not required to have any allergen labeling. So there's nothing on the outside the box that indicates to the people in the restaurant that it has an allergen product. Secondly, it is almost impossible to quarantine off a section of food preparation of allergen-free products. And third, most restaurant footprints are so very small that there isn't available space to quarantine a section to keep it allergen-free. And then on the other hand, the food manufacturers are subjected to numerous government checks. So here on the one hand, if you eat the food that you buy in a retail grocery store, you know the government has had oversight in the production of the packaging of that product, but in a restaurant it doesn't.
Okay, the next question is, how long does it take epinephrine to take effect?
I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't have any experience with that, and I would not want to give any advice on that one.
Okay, do you feel restaurants should warn if food items have nuts?
Yes, I think the restaurant should, and I've worked in almost 16, 17 different restaurant chains, and there just seems to be an environment within restaurants chains to resist giving the consumer information and mounting a plaque. And I think it should be. If we want the customer's business, we need to be giving them the information as a fair exchange.
Okay, and who is responsible for label failures?
Well, it can be a number of people. It could be the ingredient manufacturer. Let's say if someone is producing and selling allergen-containing ingredient that goes into, let's say, a cake or something, and if they don't communicate that to their customer, then the customer is not aware of it. It may assume that it's an allergen-free product, and it isn't, or vice versa. And then if it goes into a restaurant from there. So there's people all along the supply chain that could be responsible, and that's why we need to have the training that I suggested earlier.
In terms of numbers, are there successful lawsuits involving allergies? When this person researched this in the late 90s, there were no published instances of liability to be found.
You know, that's a good question, and I think there has been recently. I can't cite you anything in particular, but I see a whole area of case law developing around this whole dosage issue that I mentioned earlier. It's not the level of allergen that's in a food product. It's basically how much is in a dose or an eating or that. To me, I think we're going to see a lot more focused on that area because someone that was negatively affected by the allergen, their mom or dad, if they file a suit in behalf of their youngster, I just can't help but think that they're going to bring up the case of, well, how much did he need to eat? And he didn't eat that level or something, and he still got it. So I think there's a lot of case law development that's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Okay, we're going to continue on with the presentation. We'll have another break for questions at the end.
Okay, let me bring up the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about food manufacturing case legal implications. For manufacturing cases, and this is contrast to the restaurant that I mentioned earlier, it would be the expert witness responsibility to do research in the following areas, in my opinion. First of all, if all allergens are declared, to determine whether all allergens are declared or labeled correctly. Second would be to remember the 1% rule is not a reliable indicator of the exact risk level for allergen ingredients. From an R&D standpoint, minimize the use of potential allergens, vendor selection and approval, purchasing, then shipping and receiving. Make sure that the sealed containers match the bill of lading, and warehousing. Are the gluten-free products located in a segregated area? And then what kind of staff education and refreshment programs take place? Other legal implications for the manufacturing cases, It's the expert witness responsibility to review the production and scheduling of production runs. And usually what this means is it's smart and wise to produce product that have the least likelihood of having allergens in them early in the morning for the first production shift, and then have the allergens at the end of the day and maybe the multi-allergen products at the very end of the day, so that the plant can do a thorough cleanup and get ready for the clean products in the morning. They're staging and mixing ingredients in the secure areas, and are they using dedicated utensils, and are the utensils of a unique color, and are they stored in a locked cabinet, so to speak, so they cannot be contaminated. These are all opportunities for contamination that an expert witness needs to dig out and understand what's being used in a food plant. Some food manufacturing legal implications are, for manufacturing cases, it would be the expert witness responsibility to research proper labeling of work in progress or traceability and allergen control. And what I mean by work in progress, what that means is that's usually the stage of production of a product where several different ingredients or types of products are brought together into one, and or they're separated out, and it's hard to lose the traceability within a food company for that. For instance, if you're in a meat processing plant and you have containers with ground beef, so to speak, and then you have a seasoning, maybe you're making a taco seasoning, and that gets blended in, and maybe you use 2 different bags of taco seasoning, and one of them had an allergen in, and you start losing track. So the work in progress is an important area. Another area that's challenging is once you've made the product and you want to put rework back into the mainstream of production at a certain level, like 10%, then that increases the dosage level, or could, and all that has to be considered. And then I've listed here, does the company run line sweeps? In other words, after they've produced a product that either is allergen-free or vice versa, has the line been cleaned properly? Has it been sanitized? And has it been, so to speak, swabbed for allergen detection? And then scanning of technology of the labels. Things to look for during, kind of in summary, the expert witness plant visitation. When I would go into a plant, I would look for the plant exterior. I look at the plant security, how easy it is for products to come in and out. Plant interior cleanliness, dry ingredient storage, wet ingredient storage, scaling room, the blending of large batches, packaging and storage with sealed covers, environmental air filtration, production room, layout, usage, storage room, whether they have a HACCP program, and warehousing and shipping. I want to talk a little bit about the retail grocery business for a couple of slides here. This particular retail grocery is in Sydney, Australia. It's called Coles. And the reason I want to talk about Coles and the retail industry there is because I believe they are ahead. I mentioned the Vital tool, but I believe they're more advanced in the U.S. And they really, in my opinion, have the customer first. And what I did is I looked on their website, and I just kind of copied and pasted so you have a really specific idea of where they're coming from, is their question on their website to their consumers is, why are we changing allergen labeling? And what their answer is to meet customer demands to reduce the risk of allergic reactions, the variety of the food choices for allergen sufferers, our moral and legal responsibilities to our customers, and that they have trusted labeling. What is the business cost and brand loyalty? They want to avoid, from their standpoint, the cost of product recalls, because the last comment there, if you can read it, says that 50% of food recalls in Australia are due to the presence of undeclared allergens, and I believe that's very, very similar to what it is here in the United States. One of the things that the new Kohl's Supermarket Allergen Program, and this is, again, comes off their website, is they will highlight allergic ingredients and derivatives declared in bold letters each time they appear. They mentioned wheat, but they also mentioned the gluten source or the grain source. They mentioned specific tree nuts. In this case, it was almonds. And so what you can see is a lot of very upfront, forward, honest communication of content that I don't see in the United States is happening that much. So when it comes down to an allergen statement, you know, what this next couple of slides happens to be with General Mills. And I thought General Mills would be a good company to look at as comparison to Kohl's in Australia because they sell in the retail market in the U.S. And what I found out was from General Mills' standpoint is that they say we label sesame, sunflower, and mollusk, which is fine. They also say that we label for these allergens using contains or may contain lists located directly below the product's ingredient list. And so, you know, we understand, I've talked about the contains, it means that the allergen is included in the product's recipe, but when it gets to may contain, it means that the allergen is not in the product's recipe but could be present. And then it could also be both contains and may contain, means that if you are sensitive to a specific allergen in the list, no matter which way it is listed, you should avoid this product. And to me, that's kind of a cheap cop-out. And I think they need to be more in front. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear some attorneys talk about how strong a case law that is, whether they can you know, make those type of generalizations stick in an allergen case. General Foods, again, says that this ingredient or allergen information is for the package in hand. It's not intended for other packages of the same product. Ingredients may vary from one package to another due to product reformulation. And if you have an allergy concerns, please carefully read the ingredient information. We hope this information helps you. And to me, that's just a very general bit of information. In my opinion, Kohl's allergen statements are much stronger than General Mills and the Food Marketing Institute. And the Food Marketing Institute, I looked at their website. They are the #1 industry trade organization for the retail grocers. And it was very generic, just very general. And to kind of finish things up a little bit, I have a recent allergen recall that was occurred on February the 13th, last Friday, and it was from the T. Marzetti Company of Columbus, Ohio, and that they were voluntarily recalling 627 cases of La Rosa's creamy garlic dressing in 1.5-ounce packets. The dressing was manufactured correctly, but has always contained milk and egg. However, there was error in labeling, they said. And so I believe the process was really followed correctly on their part, but it's just unfortunate that someone didn't catch it earlier, and this product went into the public trade area. So that's all that I have for this. I'm turning back to you, Emily.
Okay, and could all the attendees please type the passcode in again for CLE credit? Our first question is, are there hand washing regulations in California?
You know, I haven't seen it specifically, but my experience in working in restaurant chains that are based out of California but have restaurants in California, yes, there are hand washing instructions. It's pretty standard across the U.S., and the hand washing has to go on for 20 seconds.
Have you worked with any school districts to develop allergy protocols?
No, I haven't. I think that's a great idea. You know, we talked about retail today. We talked about food service, but the whole school and institutional thing is a prime opportunity to further that training into those areas.
Okay, and is it a breach of standard of care in the industry if restaurants do not warn that there are nuts used as an ingredient in a food item?
I think the status is now that it's kind of community or city-based, just like when the United States we rolled out trans fat-free frying oils, and started, I think, in New York, and ended up, you know, going to Chicago and some other cities, and out to the West Coast and San Francisco area. The whole campaign against styrofoam containers, I think, started in Oakland, and so I think the same thing needs to happen as far as labeling, and I fully support having framed policies or information to where the consumer's at the point of sale, not just hidden on some back hallway or something. But I fully support that, and I think it's important that we do that. We've got a long ways to go.
Okay, and what precautions should people with allergies take when eating at restaurants?
I think the very first thing you need to do is talk to the store manager, find out if he has any kind of a list of allergic-free products, and if he can't produce that list, I've turned around and go to somewhere else that has that or has that reputation. And one of the ways to avoid that hassle, so to speak, is to call in advance and ask them. And also when you're talking to the restaurant, talk to someone at a manager or general manager level so that they really know. They're going to know more than someone that's an hourly person. That's my recommendation.
Okay, and do you have any other examples of current allergen recall cases?
There's another one that happened just Tuesday this week, and it's by a company called Goya Foods. They produce different black beans with Creole seasoning and stuff. And in this particular situation, a voluntary recall was announced after the company was notified by one of its ingredient suppliers that one lot of ground cumin, believe it or not, had potentially been produced, and undeclared peanut protein entered that recipe. So, yes, both of these cases that I mentioned happened within about 3 or 4 working days of each other.
Why are employees not trained sufficiently on allergen contaminants?
It all comes down to what is the priority of a restaurant chain. In most restaurant chains, that begins with the training and the operations departments, and a lot of times training reports into operations, and ultimately operations are managed by the chief operating officer. So it's just a matter of not prioritizing it.
Okay, and what might be the most effective way to minimize undeclared allergens?
I think requiring people to test for them, and it's not a cheap test by any means, but that's really, I think, if we started requiring that, food companies would start taking a fresh look immediately. They don't want to be burdened with that expense, and they don't want to be burdened with the public information that they failed to test.
You mentioned that current law or standard industry practice requires less than 1% detection level, but how confident are you that that is a safe level?
I'm not very confident that it is the safe level, just because of some of the research that's been done in Australia that showed that even as low as less than 1 milligram can be a trigger. That's what I base my opinion on.
Okay, and this person says that their experience has been that when a waiter or waitress is asked if the food contains buckwheat, they don't get a definitive answer, even after the waiter or waitress asks the chef. Is this the norm?
Based on my experience in restaurant business, I would say that it could be the norm. And that's why I mentioned earlier, call in advance, request a conversation with either the manager or the general manager. If there's a general manager that may be over that store or several stores, most of the time in the various chains I've worked on, they're going to know it, and they're going to be willing to find out if they don't know. They usually are more motivated, more responsible people in those positions.
Okay, and what could be done to forewarn restaurant customers?
Warn customers, again, just mounting kind of informational plaques, so to speak, in a restaurant that talks about allergens, gluten-free product availability, and that kind of thing. And, I think another really cool idea would be to, and it's done in food manufacturing facilities, maybe not quite as much because of the risk, but, invite people to take a tour through your restaurant. And if you're unashamed of giving them a tour, that your restaurant's being kept crystal clean, so to speak, that I think is a great communication tool. And, as I said, a lot of food companies, they have windows built in, and they have a specific hallway where school groups and others can kind of come through and watch products being made. What a great trust building factor, and educational opportunity that is.
And is the chef or the restaurant at fault if there's a customer with an allergy issue?
Well, they could be. And that's something to look for if there was a legal case in that area, because if the chef was making product and there was not constraints put in place to protect the allergen ingredients from getting into an allergen-free product, then they would be, in my opinion, liable. And I know that I've done some teaching at a leading culinary university here in the United States as an adjunct professor, and we talked about the subject, but again, I would say it just wasn't a priority, and that's where the owners of a restaurant chain or new restaurant chain starting, if they can start from the beginning and put those reminder processes in place, it's going to be to the benefit of the consumer.
What is your opinion about precautionary allergen statements?
I just have a hard time with precautionary statements because it's a catch-all. And with the technology and detection instrumentation that we have to do analytical testing of food products, it can be tested, so we'll know black or white. It's either the allergen is either in the product or it's out. And if it shouldn't be there, then stop production like they do in a regular food manufacturing company, and close the restaurant until it gets done right.
What is more effective, hand sanitizer or soap and water?
It depends on how long your fingers are exposed to each one of them. Like I said, washing for 20 seconds. But if I had to pick between the two, I'd probably pick the hand sanitizer.
Okay, and what if a consumer has a nut allergy but doesn't advise the server?
You know, I'm not an attorney, but I would say they bear the responsibility for not bringing up the subject and asking.
Okay, those are all the questions that we have. So we're going to continue on with the CLE information. This webinar is eligible for CLE credit in California, Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Texas. To ensure that you receive your CLE credit, please complete the survey at the end of the presentation. This is also a reminder that CLE certificates will be provided within 24 to 48 hours via email. In addition to being your best source for testifying and consulting experts, TASA also offers e-discovery and document management solutions, free interactive webinars, and research reports on expert witnesses such as the Challenge History Report 2.0, the Professional Sanction Search, and the Expert Profile 360. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and most especially Darrel Suderman for his time and effort in creating this presentation. If you would like to speak with Dr. Suderman, or if you would like to speak with a TASA representative regarding an expert witness for a case that you are working on, please contact TASA at 1-800-523-2319. This is a reminder that we will be sending out a link to you tomorrow with the archive recording. The archive recording will also be posted in the Knowledge Center on TASA's website. If you have any questions or comments, please email Carol Kowaleski. Thank you all again for attending, and have a great day.